To the point.
My name is Craig Miller, and I announce my candidacy today for the United States Senate from the great state of Florida.
Floridians elected a governor without any political experience, but are they ready to elect another political novice?
That is one of the questions we'll be asking Craig Miller, our guest today on To the Point. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kelly Dunn, along with Michael Williams, and we say thank you very much, Mr. Miller, for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Let's get to the point. You were once the CEO of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse Restaurants, and we were just talking a little bit off camera, and you said that someone had said to you once, well, if you can sell a $40 steak, you can run for U.S. Senate. And I'm sure that was in jest, but what does qualify you to run for the United States Senate?
Well, you know, when I decided to get in this race, the opportunity is pretty unique given what's going on today in our world and in America. And I believe that life's experiences are the key to a successful political career. And I have spent my life as a business person creating over 40,000 jobs in the companies that I worked with. And as you mentioned, I built the Ruth's Chris right here in Palm Beach a few years ago, employing some 80 people and bringing, you know, economic growth to this region, as I did in many states around the country in the major chains. You know, people talk about political experience. I like to talk about life's experience. But even having said that, I'm former chairman of the National Restaurant Association. You may have heard of my friend Herman Cain. He held that same position. The restaurant industry is one of the largest private sector employers in the country. Over 14 million Americans work in our industry, the food service industry. So issues like health care and immigration and workforce issue and job creation and using capital, putting it to work, generating profitable businesses is something I've been doing all my life. So I feel I'm ready for this and really looking forward to it.
You ran for Congress in the Orlando area last year and finished third. So why was your message not, you know, out to the people at that point?
I think the message did get out. I came in 1,600 votes short in a very competitive primary. I was in the race a little bit late, but raised more money than the other candidates, and it encouraged me. It encouraged me that my message resonated, came so close to winning that district. And I come from Winter Park, Central Florida. I grew up in Brevard County. I'm a military war veteran. I volunteered for service in Vietnam back when I was a very young person. And I believe America's ready for more business people, people with more varied experiences coming to the United States Senate. And, you know, taking chances, not winning all the time, is something business people do all the time. So that hasn't deterred me one bit.
Mr. Miller, why should you not be worried about criticism that people have that people coming out of the business sector may be tone deaf to the public's needs? Mr. Scott, Governor Scott, has near record low numbers in terms of approval as a governor as you compare him to people around the state, a longtime businessman. Some argue he simply does not understand the needs of Florida, and he's tone deaf to that. How do you respond?
Well, you know, in some respects, I can compare some parts of what I have done in my life to Governor Scott. I personally think he's doing a pretty good job for the people of Florida. He's doing exactly what he said what he would do, and that is focus on building the economy of Florida back and creating jobs. But I think there are some differences. As a restaurateur and someone that has been not only in service to our country, but in service to the American people and the people of Florida through my food service experience, I learned a long time ago, it's not what you learn in the boardroom, it's what you learn in the kitchens and the dining rooms of the businesses that I ran.
If you were a United States Senator, would you have voted to raise the debt ceiling, or would you have said, we'll go into default if we have to, but I'm not going to vote to raise it?
Well, I think that's two questions. Would I have voted to put our country in default? No. I would never do that. You don't give bankers or lenders a big stick. You don't put yourself in a situation where you can make things worse.
So a mistake among your Republican colleagues in your mind who did in fact say they'd vote that way?
No, what I would say is I don't think that would have put us in default. I would have followed exactly what Marco Rubio did. I would not have voted to raise the debt ceiling because I don't think it would have put us in default. I think what it had done, it would have forced our country and our government to step back and prioritize where the money was going and make sure that we took care of the priorities that start with our citizens, our seniors, our veterans, and also the people that we borrowed money from.
But wouldn't it have been to the detriment of the people who would have put you in office had you been in office at that time? That, you know, it's the people that are hurt in a situation like that when mortgage rates go up, credit card rates go, I mean, everything goes up, and they're the ones stuck.
Well, the question that you raised, though, and I think this is the most pointed question, is not raising the debt ceiling would that have created a default and created putting our country into default? I don't believe it would have. And as a business person, you know, you don't threaten to do that. What you do is you work ahead of the problem. What I would have done if I'd have been in the Senate, the first thing I would have done in January, if I'd have been elected to the Senate, is demand that we create a budget for our country. Okay? This crisis was on everybody's radar screen for years and months. It's the inactivity in the American Congress, the inactivity in the U.S. Senate, it's the ineffectual things that are going on in Washington that brought us to the situation where there was a threat of default. I don't believe that it was necessarily a real threat. Now, if I felt that that vote would have put this country in default of its commitments to its lenders, then the vote would have been different. I don't believe that would have been the case.
Lots of people on government pensions will be watching this, seniors, many of them in our community. Given the choice between cutbacks in Social Security and Medicare, or, as the President and Democrats argue, revenue enhancements or tax increases, given the choice between one or the other, where do you stand?
Well, first of all, I woke up the other morning, my wife asked me what time it was, and I said jobs. But I'm going to ask you a question.
But to this question, if you had the choice, fundamentally, as a United States Senator, to say I either vote for tax increases or cutbacks in Medicare and Social Security, where do you stand on that? And then explain.
Okay. I would never vote to take away the benefits that have been earned for our citizens, our veterans, and the people in need. I would never make a vote that would take away those benefits from the American people. My mother's 91 years old, okay? She paid, and my dad, who was orphaned when he was 8, went through the greatest generation. They set up plans for the future of themselves and their families. What we have to do now is we have to modernize these programs for future generations. The children and grandchildren that we have today do not have programs we do not have programs that are sustainable for those people. So I would be in favor of raising the retirement age for people that are currently entering the workforce and people that have not been in the workforce very long. When those programs were put in place, particularly Social Security, the life expectancy for the American people, American male, was somewhere around 63 years old. Okay? Now that number is 78 to 80. So we need to do things to modernize those programs. And I think everybody, from Medicare to Social Security, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, understands that the programs we have in place right now are not sustainable for future generations, and we're going to burden our children and grandchildren, and it's immoral. You know, I have a new grandson, he's 16 months old. I don't want to leave him $400,000, $500,000 in debt.
Well, raising the retirement age won't solve the budget crisis. So then what gives if you don't want to, you know, take anything away from the people that are already getting these benefits? Then what do we do?
Well,
what happens?
As a business person, the way I look at this is that the best pathway to getting us out of this financial crisis is economic growth. You put more people to work, you get more taxpayers on the rolls, and you get our economy turned around. That's why I think Governor Scott is on point when he says we got to create more jobs. We will get more revenue coming into the federal and state governments when we get our economy growing again. And why I am not supportive of tax increases, particularly right now, is because they are barriers, potential barriers from economic growth.
But are you saying absolutely no, never to any tax increase, as many of your Republican colleagues are? Are you saying no, never, ever, no matter what?
Listen, there are different things that need to be done at different times. You know, how do you define a tax increase? Is a tax increase a net increase where the government is taking more revenue and a bigger percentage of our gross national product? I'm not for that, okay? And I wouldn't vote to take more taxes from the American people. Are there some necessary changes that need to be made to make sure
the tax base?
Broadening the tax base, get more revenues coming in, but how do you get those revenues? And right now, the best pathway, I think, is to create economic growth. We need to be talking about not only the fact that we don't have jobs, but why that is. We got to be talking about the number of jobs that are outsourced. Why are so many jobs going overseas? Because we no longer have a competitive market here in the U.S. And every time you send a job overseas, what do you send? You send not only the potential for tax revenue coming out of those jobs, you put people out of work. And we need to do things right now to stop that trend.
So where are these jobs going to come from? And especially in Florida, how are you going to get more Floridians back to work? You can't just open a restaurant and then hire a bunch of people like, you know, you've done during your career. So where do the jobs come from specifically?
The jobs are the result of economic activity and economic growth. Businessmen don't start businesses to create job opportunities for people. That's the benefit of what they do. So what we need to do is we need to, every chance we get through regulation reform, lower taxes on companies, leave the financial capital in the businesses. When the financial capital is in the businesses, it can be deployed, and make sure that the rewards coming out from the investment is worth the risk.
Many will argue that this is, with all respect, Republican boilerplate about taxes and spending. And fundamentally, how do you cut through the clutter when you're running against Mr. Hasner, Mr. McAllister, Lemieux, all of people, George Lemieux, all of whom have more political experience than you? What's different about your message? What's your standout message that's any different than what we hear from every Republican candidate?
I'm not a career politician. I'm a business person. I spent my life dealing with the issues and problems associated with not only the government and how it manages its affairs, but also the private sector. How do you put capital to work? You know, what type of congressman do we want to elect? What type of United States senator do the people of Florida want? Do they want someone that served 40 years as Bill Nelson in public office, or they want someone that's created 40,000 jobs? That's the choice, and that's the difference that I bring.
Rick Scott put $73 million of his own money into his campaign.
I'm not doing that.
How much of your own money are you going to put in?
You know, I'm not going to answer that, but I'm no Rick Scott. You know, I've told people this is not. Don't look at me as a self-financed candidate for the United States Senate. I'm working very hard. I'm moving around the state. I want the people of Florida to look at Craig Miller and what I've done with my life, from a 13-year-old dishwasher to a board of directors and chairman of a major restaurant company, and look at my all total life experiences from the time I volunteered at 18 and a half years old to go to Vietnam to the time I finished my career in 2008 as the chairman and CEO of Ruth's Chris. They need to look at that record, and they need to decide, is that the type of citizen statesman they'd like to send to Washington to represent them.
We'll be watching your campaign. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Craig Miller, for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
You bet, Kelly. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, our roundtable takes on this week's political stories. Time now for our roundtable. Joining us, George Bennett, the political reporter with the Palm Beach Post, and also Brian Crowley, author of CrowleyPoliticalReport.com. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Give us your comments about what Craig Miller had to say. Brian, you want to start?
Well, he certainly didn't indicate that he was going to spend any of his own personal fortune on this race. I don't know how much money he's raising at this point, but unless he shows some ability to raise the significant amount of money you need to win a statewide nomination, I don't think it's going to be an easy feat for Craig Miller to surpass George Lemieux and Adam Hasner in this race. But we'll see.
Tough state to have no name recognition, where you'd need a big retail campaign, lots of money for advertising. You share his view?
Money's important, yes. I'll go out on a limb and say that in Florida with all its media markets, sure. And I'm waiting for the candidate to come out and just say, you know what, I'm a career politician and I just want the next job. But seriously, I mean, he does, you know, he has more business experience than his rivals in the race so far. And, you know, so he has a unique story and whatever. And it is a matter, though, of, you know, people accuse journalists of focusing too much on money, but you need a lot of money to get your message out in Florida. And so, you know, his first quarterly report that he files in October will be, you know, very important.
You know, you need $1.5 million a week to run a week's worth of television in this state for a maximum buy throughout the state. That doesn't count everything else that you have to buy to spend money on for a successful campaign. So, you know, we don't. It's a shame that money is the be-all and the end-all, but there's 4 million Republican voters in this state, and you have to reach them somehow, and the only way to do it is with a lot of dough buying TV ads and radio ads and the like.
Let's talk about the guest we had last week on To The Point, and that is Congressman Allen West. He was at a Tea Party meeting last week and said the same thing he said right here last week on To The Point, that he is keeping the door open a crack to the possibility of running for the Senate. George, you were at the meeting. Is there talk of him making this, you know, turn toward the Senate?
Sure. I mean, you know, the thing about this race is that the candidates that are in it so far, I think some money people and others are kind of sitting on the sidelines in this expectation or hope that somebody else might get in. Allen West is a national fundraising powerhouse. Until the show last week, he had pretty much flatly rejected the Senate race. I'd asked him about it several times, and so that's the first indication at all. He won't say. I get the impression somebody has talked to him recently to ask him about it, because he put it in terms of, well, I'm not going to slam the door on somebody that's asking me. He wouldn't say who that was, but, you know, clearly people are looking for someone else to get in.
Brian, how viable would he be against the field right now? We were talking about the fact you've got a guy with name recognition, and the people who want to contribute money say, well, at least in this world of retail mass media marketing, we get a real head start with this guy and a bang for our buck. How viable in your mind against him if he got beyond that to Bill Nelson?
I can't gauge how well he would do against Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson is a very seasoned campaigner. No matter who he runs against this time, he's going to have a terrific fight. The PACs around the nation. This is a national race, this seat, and they're going to throw a lot of money into this. I do think there's no question that if Alan West decided to jump into this primary, it would do grievous harm to George Lemieux, Adam Hasner, Greg Miller, and the other candidates in the race. I mean, he raised $1.5 million in the last quarter compared to $950,000 for George Lemieux, a former U.S. Senator, albeit briefly. It was pretty impressive, and I think Alan West can raise a lot of money, and the Tea Party loves him, no matter what he does.
The guy has a following, sure.
All right, well, Florida's presidential straw poll is next month. Some of the major candidates are not in it. We're going to take a look at that when we come back. Michelle Bachmann wins the Iowa straw poll, but now says she will not be participating in Florida's straw poll next month. What effect will that have on the race in Florida and her campaign in the state? Plus, Rick Perry jumps into the race and quickly captures the spotlight, but he's still deciding whether he'll be in the Florida straw poll. Mitt Romney has already said he's not going to take part. So does Florida lose some of its impact?
No, I mean, there's going to be a nationally televised debate that Thursday night, and then there's the CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, going on, and all the candidates are going to be there. So, they're going to be paying a lot of attention to Florida and getting a lot of exposure, regardless of what happens in the straw poll. Size up the race right now. It looks like the three, Bachmann, and then you would argue Perry and Romney duking it out. Size up the landscape in Florida for those three.
You know, I've painted a scenario where Bachmann could actually pull ahead in Florida. I think if she wins Iowa, does well in New Hampshire, does well in South Carolina, I think she could do well in Florida. When you look at what the U.S. Senate candidates are doing in this state, they're pushing toward, they're campaigning to the hard right, because that's who they expect to vote in this primary. Those are the folks that Bachmann appeals to. I think that there's every reason to believe that if she doesn't commit some huge gaffe, which she's prone to do, that kills her along the way. I could see her continuing to do first and seconds all the way to Florida and becoming a serious player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back 4 years ago at this stage. Rudy Giuliani was the front runner in Florida. Fred Thompson was the big, exciting candidate getting in the race, and that lasted about, to the second day of his first bus tour, where he just completely fizzled. And John McCain was way back, and he ended up winning Florida and winning the nomination. So, which is all to say, you just can't predict this far out.
But a lot are arguing that really Rick Perry is Bachmann, but with a lot more legislative experience, and really effectively takes the wind out of her sails, and that we're looking at a Romney-Perry matchup. And of course, I love all this in August of 2011. Next year's going to be fun. But your take on that?
Saying, yeah.
Well, I mean, Perry has become another one of these wild cards. I think the interesting thing, one of the interesting things with Perry getting into this race is even that hasn't settled down this desire among many Republicans that they still want another candidate. I had somebody last week say to me, oh gosh, I wish Jeb Bush would get into the race. You've got some people pushing Chris Christie. I mean, how many candidates do the Republicans need this cycle? Clearly there's a lot of folks that think Obama's going to be an easy takeout in this cycle, because everybody seems to be getting in.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, Rick Perry has a proven track record and everything in Texas, but, I still haven't, until you really see him on the campaign trail, presidential campaign trail, it's hard to say.
And he may have a Bush problem in Florida. The Karl Rove and the Bush family are not particularly fond of Rick Perry.
Right.
There's nothing else that Jeb Bush is. It's loyal to mommy and daddy, and they don't like Rick Perry, and I suspect that if Jeb Bush wanted to block Rick Perry in Florida, he would try to do it.
All right, we'll be back to wrap it up on To The Point right after this. And now some final thoughts before we go. Let's begin with George.
If you're a local political junkie, it's like the Berlin Wall coming down, this term limits ruling, and it's opening up. It looks like now Bert Aronson and Karen Marcus, who've been on the commission forever, will be term limited, and there's going to be a torrent of candidates running for those seats.
Palm Beach County. Get ready.
Well, and just to show the weirdness of this election cycle, as we were talking about off the air, August you know, we're talking about August, and we don't even know what's happening in August 2012. Last week, there were stories once again all about who might be the vice presidential candidate next year, and of course, whose name pops up? Marco Rubio.
Surprise, surprise. Get the binoculars up.
And much more to talk about every Sunday morning right here on To The Point, because it changes by the week with another interesting story to follow. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. We thanks to George Bennett and to Brian Crowley for being with us, and we hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.